They came to the ranch, lady. I didn't go to them. They came to me. You're stealing my music every day. When I stand on the mountain and I say, do it, it gets done. If it don't get done, then I'll move on it.
A failed musician, a master manipulator, a cult leader who built an unbreakable hold over his followers. In the late 1960s, Charles Manson gathered a devoted group who believed in his radical ideas. But behind his philosophy was something much darker, an agenda that would shake Hollywood and America to its core. Manson spoke of a coming war, a prophecy he called Helter Skelter. But what really happened at Spahn Ranch, and what led to his downfall? This is the true story of Charles Manson and the cult that shook the world. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lindsay Unfiltered, and today we will be starting our Behind the Cult series. And the first topic or group that we will be addressing on this series will be Charles Manson and the family. If you have suggestions for more cults that you want me to look into, I would be glad to do that. Just drop that down in the comment section below. If you like content like this that revolves around scandal, true crime, conspiracy with a twist of humor, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 3K followers. Now, without further ado, let's talk about Charles Manson and the family. Charles Manson was born on November 12th, 1934. His parents were Kathleen Maddox and Colonel Walker Henderson. Kathleen Maddox was 16 years old when she had Manson. She had a troubled life, struggling with alcohol and crime. His father was a con man, but was not involved in his life. Where Manson adopted his last name was from his mother's second husband, William Manson. The couple stayed together briefly, but they were to split after that. Charles Manson's childhood was very unstable, filled with crime and recklessness. This probably had a lot to do with him not having a strong family unit. His mother had a criminal past herself and an alleged alcohol problem. She went to jail in 1939 when Manson was 5 years old for armed robbery. So that left Manson bouncing between family members who really could care less. The crime started around the age of 9 years old, petty theft, burglary. He got arrested for the first time at age 13, but he would be in and out of jail for his whole juvenile life. He went to a reform school to try to get him whipped into shape, but his controlling and conniving features could be seen there, trying to con some of the other students, trying to manipulate some of the other students. And all in all, with that being said, his childhood was a very damaged one. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Charles Manson was a musician. He played guitar and sang fairly well enough to where he was being looked at by record producers to be signed to a label. Well enough that he was friends with the Beach Boy drummer Dennis Wilson. Now, this is all during the rise of the counterculture. This is all during a time when Charles Manson first started to gain a little bit of notoriety after leaving prison. Most of 1967, Charles Manson spent his time in San Francisco at the rise of the counterculture, or the hippie movement, the anti-war movement, the women's rights movement. Those things were really being pushed for during this time. Charlie attracted women and Charlie attracted men. But this is when we first see people start to follow Charlie in a way. Charlie called these women his girls. And the women gravitated towards Charlie because they all had no one. If anything, Charles Manson was a very charismatic individual. And I say that because we've talked about cult leaders in the past. They are seemingly charismatic people. They're seemingly likable people. They're people that people want to be around just by genuine curiosity. People feel blessed to be in these people's presence because their charisma is unmatched. When we talk about Charlie's music career, how he got in close with the Beach Boys and befriended drummer Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson invited Charlie and his girls to live with him for a short amount of time because he felt as if, hey, unlimited substances and unlimited women, what could go wrong? A lot went wrong, including alleged venereal diseases that they all caught because these women were at Charlie's whim, they were at Charlie's will. So if Charlie said, be intimate with this guy, that guy, and this guy, and that guy, in one night, they would happily oblige. Manson met with a record producer, but it just wasn't at the time what he was looking for, music-wise. So Manson never got signed. A lot of people say his resentment for the music industry is what led to the horrifying things he did in 1969. Charlie and his girls, or the family, which were a group of women and men who lived with Charlie, moved to Spahn Ranch. Spahn Ranch was an abandoned movie set out in the middle of nowhere, and they were isolated. They didn't have contact with anybody else outside of themselves. And we also talked about this idea that I have that, once you isolate these people and they're in this echo chamber where their own propaganda seems to reverberate off each other, they have no means of getting out or seeing a different opinion. Charlie was abusing and manipulating his followers early on. He made his followers believe that they owed him something. If Charlie did something for one of his followers, in return, his followers would have to do something for him. For example, Tex Watson was one of Charlie's followers. Tex Watson had set up a deal with a Black Panther involving substances. The deal went bad, and Manson ended up powing the Black Panther. In him doing that, he then felt like Tex Watson owed him one.
Now you owe me one. And if you don't pay me when you owe me, then I'm going to pay you what you owe me. You see what I'm saying? In other words, I have to go into another person and put on another face and come back and play,
I understand. So you say to Tex, you owe me one.
That's right.
So Tex Watson would have to pow on Charlie's behalf one day. So he did a very good job of making these people believe that he was saving them from some type of overlooming threat. And in saving them from those threats, they had to do what he asked. It seems as if a lot of their conflicts revolved around substances. If a substance deal went wrong, somebody needed to pay for it. So much so that Charles Manson cut a man's ear in a substance deal gone wrong. He left one of his followers, Bobby, with the man and told him he knew what he needed to do at this point. And Bobby did, unaliving this unsuspecting man. Now, Charles Manson was still coaching his followers back at the ranch, and he told his followers, we can blame this unaliving on the Black Panther Party. There's already a lot of resistance with them, and I don't like them because we have had substance deals go wrong with them. So let's blame the Black Panthers for this stuff that we're doing. In doing that, he told Gary to write something on the wall relating to police, Piggy, something of that nature, to try to pin Gary's unaliving on the Black Panther Party. The only tie that I can make of Charles Manson's hate and resentment for the Black Panther Party was that he did not like Black people, or he had an ongoing vendetta with a Black Panther. That's the only two things I could assume. Later on in his life, Manson had etched a swastika on his forehead. So we really don't know what was going through this man's mind. And soon after that first unaliving is when the family went on their rampage, unaliving 7 people over a span of 2 nights. The first night, actress Sharon Tate and 4 others were unalived in very heinous and harrowing ways by several members of the family. Manson ordered Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian to go in the house and unalive everyone who was there. Tex Watson went in saying he was the devil and there to do the devil's business, and pow-powed several people at the property. Stephen Parent was unalive trying to leave the property in his car. The remaining victims were brutally unalived. Sharon Tate was 8 months pregnant at the time, and she was brutally unalived. Jay Sebring was pow-powed and brutally unalived. Krajewski was encountered by a weapon 51 times and also pow-powed. Holger did try to escape, but was also encountered with a weapon 28 times. They used the victim's blood to write messages on the wall. Pig. So I'll take you back to the Gary unaliving done by Bobby. There was political piggy, and now this unaliving you have pig. So it seems as if the family was trying to pin these murders as well on the Black Panther Party. The alleged motive behind these unalivings was to start a race war. That a race war was going to start anyway, so inevitably they had to kick it into gear, and they would be the only ones that survived this. They used Beatles songs to back up their propaganda. Manson talked of the song Helter Skelter. He talked of the song that the Beatles have about pigs, and he brainwashed his followers into feeling no remorse whatsoever about unaliving innocent people. They felt nothing. They have said in prison interviews, we feel nothing, we don't care. We were just doing the will of Charlie Manson. So if you thought that was bad, 6 people are gone now. But the next night, right after the Sharon Tate unalivings, there was another string of unaliving at the La Bianca residence. The home of Leno and Rosemary Bianca was broken into by Tex Watson, Leslie Van Houten, and Patricia Krenwinkel. Manson decided to come along this time because he said the night before was too much. So he decided to come along, and he tied them up, told them nothing would happen to them, and he got in the car and he left. Again, leaving his followers to do his bidding. Rosemary was encountered with the weapon 41 times. Leno was encountered with the weapon 12 times. And the unalivers again wrote rise, pigs, helter skelter, all of these things all over the house, trying to tie this back to the Black Panther Party. But honestly, that is how they gave themselves up to police, in my opinion. All 3 of these unalivings had something to do with Piggy or something like that written on these people's walls. So the police know we have something in common with the 3 of these. They're all targeted towards police, or things are written in substances all across the property. Now, these string of unalivings were completely senseless, completely brutal, and the people who did them did not care, nor did they feel remorse while doing it. These people were on LSD. I would go as far as to say their brain and the way they think was permanently changed by the excess of substances that they did. And having Manson preach at them day in and day out, they became blind followers to anything that Manson said. What is the motive behind this? And people still struggle with this to this day. But from what I've researched and what I've looked at, in my opinion, the motive has a lot to do with Manson's failed music career. Manson being let down by that executive producer, and then he went to take it out on people who were successful or living in the same areas as that producer would have lived. Yet he told his followers it was some type of revolution. They were one of a kind, when really they were only carrying out his personal vendetta. So how did they get caught? The police had their suspicions about the family. They were being rounded up for substance and theft charges. The police always were a bit tipped off about this group. But when Susan Atkins went to jail for one of these charges, she told her cellmate everything she'd done.
And I was left sitting with Sharon Tate, and she was talking to me, and I remember that I felt nothing. I felt absolutely nothing for her as she begged for her life and for the life of her baby.
And that gave police reasonable cause to charge members of the family with these unaliving. Manson's arrest shined a lot of conflict on the counterculture movement and the late 1960s. People saying that, hey, if your child believes in this woke ideology, if your child believes in this Black Panther ideology or women's movement ideology, they may be insane, just like these people who committed this crime. Manson wanted to blame these crimes on the Black Panther Party. That's been said numerous times. What makes it interesting is that and the creation of COINTELPRO, which was a group to eradicate Black Panthers, eradicate women's rights protesters, anti-war protesters by the federal government. Some conspiracy theorists find it funny that at the same time Manson was trying to pin something on the Black Panther movement, the government had an entire agency on invalidating the same movement. So they're like, are they connected? Was he working for them? I think it's too far-fetched, but you never know. The women were complete followers. They would do whatever Manson told them to do. If Manson came out with an X on his forehead, they were there with an X on their forehead. It was complete mind control, which people didn't expect this of Charles Manson because he was just a derelict in and out of jail. How did he command so much power from these people? I think drugs had a lot to do with it, a ton to do with it, but also a charismatic person taking advantage. They would take this LSD for days at a time while he's preaching in their ear. I feel like the shape of their brain was changed by the things that they were doing. They lost all connection with reality. These women, Tex Watson, Charlie Manson, smiled as they were being brought into court. Their faces emptied, their souls empty. They smiled and relished in this moment as if they were some type of martyrs. They were found guilty for all 7 unaliving. He was fascinated with mind control and the people he had at his will. He saw them as disposable. He saw them as people to carry out his bidding. Charles Manson was convicted of conspiracy and directing the crimes. He was sentenced initially to unaliving, but later changed to life in prison. He died in 2017 after 48 years in prison. Tex Watson was convicted of carrying out all of these attacks, and he was sentenced to the death penalty, but it was later changed to life in prison, and he's still in prison today. Susan Atkins was convicted of being a key participant and later confessing in jail. She was sentenced to unaliving, but that soon became life in prison. She died in 2009, 40 years in prison. Patricia Krenwinkel was convicted of direct involvement in multiple attacks. She was sentenced to unaliving, was later changed to life in prison. She was granted parole in 2022, but denied release. Leslie Van Houten was arrested for participating in the LaBianca case. She was sentenced to the unaliving penalty, which was later changed to life in prison, and she was released in July 2023 after 53 years in prison. And you also have Bobby Bussolil, who was arrested for taking part in that first attack, and he was sentenced to life in prison, and he is still incarcerated to this day. So it goes without saying that Charles Manson's actions directly and indirectly involved a whole generation of people. But it's more important to look at the key factors that allowed him to do this. In my unfiltered opinion, I believe drugs had a large thing to do with this. I believe that people that didn't have a community or guidance had a large thing to do with this. I also believe that the isolation on Spahn Ranch had a lot to do with this, and Charlie Manson's charismatic character had a lot to do with this. How old were you when you first heard about the Charlie Manson case? And what do you think about it to this day? I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below, and who you want to see next on the Behind the Cult series. I want to thank everybody for watching. This has been Lindsay Unfiltered. Bye now.